What's good, family? I pray that you had an incredible week, and welcome back to another installment of Manhood Mondays, our weekly devotionals where we give you biblical principles that promote biblical manhood. Today, I want to talk to you about a concept that every man is going to have to live out in some capacity in their lives, and that's leadership. Whether it's you leading your family, leading your children, leading a team, leading at work, or even leading your own organization. Regardless of the size of your leadership responsibility, God expects you to lead His way. Wherever and whoever God calls you to lead, just know that it's God's desire that you lead others as you faithfully follow Him. You see, it's been said that if you're too big to serve, you're too small to lead. And if you're too proud to follow, then you'll never be humble enough to lead. Leadership is such a sacred and daunting task that it forces us to spend time in God's presence and in His Word as we seek to discern the best way to lead others. Now, if there's one person in the Bible that has exemplifies what it meant to actually lean on God and depend upon God's presence as you lead others, that's Moses. You see, Moses was destined to lead from birth. And although he was completely unaware of God's sovereign plan, God was preparing him for one of the greatest assignments in all of redemptive history. God's presence was on full display throughout the life of Moses. It was His presence that was there as God used his mother to preserve his life by hiding him for 3 months and placing him in a wicker basket in the Nile, while Pharaoh was determined to kill every newborn Hebrew male. It was God's presence that was there when Moses was discovered in the Nile by Pharaoh's own daughter. God's presence was there when Moses spent 40 years living in Pharaoh's house, another 40 years living in obscurity on the backside of the wilderness in Midian, and it will be God's presence that would greet Moses at a burning bush prior to calling him to emancipate God's chosen people who had been in slavery for 430 years. Through plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of cloud by night, Moses relied on the presence of God in order to lead God's people because he knew that he could not do it on its own. And although Moses relied on God's presence, it would still be times when Moses would become overwhelmed by the task at hand. It's not easy leading God's people, but through it all, he understood that time in God's presence would reorient him so that he could effectively lead God's people. So today, I want to talk to you and walk you through an instance in Moses' life where he was renewed in order to lead effectively by the presence of God. So let's take a look at what it means to lead God's people with a shining face. The Lord also said to Moses, "Write down these words, for I have made a covenant with you and with Israel based on these words." Moses was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat food or drink water. He wrote the 10 Commandments, the words of the covenant, on the tablets. And as Moses descended from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands, as he descended the mountain, he did not realize that the skin of his face shone as a result of speaking with the Lord. And when Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, the skin of his face shone. They were afraid to come near him. But Moses called out to them. So Aaron and all the leaders of the community returned to him, and Moses spoke to them. Afterwards, all the Israelites came near, and he commanded them to do everything the Lord had told him on Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever Moses went before the Lord to speak with him, he would remove the veil until he came out. After he came out, he would tell the Israelites what he had been commanded. And the Israelites would see that Moses' face was radiant. And then Moses would put the veil over his face again until he went to speak with the Lord. Here in this text, we see 3 components of leading with a shining face. The first thing Moses demonstrates here is private obedience. Private obedience to God is the idea of demonstrating godly character. You see, God told Moses something to do privately, and Moses demonstrated complete obedience. Before we can lead others well, we must learn to be obedient to God in the little things when no one else is looking. How obedient are you when nobody sees what you're doing. Leading with a shiny face begins with private obedience to God. Second component of Moses' leadership is his public dependence upon God. Next, we witness Moses' private time with God lead to an anointing that everyone noticed. You see, time with God produces a public display of godliness that others can't help but follow. Just as Moses told the Lord, Moses told the people, and the people obeyed. If private obedience to God leads to godly character, then public dependence upon God will lead to impeccable reputation. Let's depend upon God. Then lastly, Moses demonstrated consistent communion with God. You see, Moses has a rhythm throughout his life. He would go up the mountain, commune with God, get the shiny face, and then speak to the people. He'd go up to the mountain, commune with God, get the shiny face, and then speak to the people. If we're going to be great leaders, we must have a consistent commitment to spending time with God. Let me say it the way that Pastor J.D. Greer would say it. Courage in the lion's den comes from consistency in the prayer closet. We need to be consistent in our communion with God. Well, brothers, that's it for this installment of Manhood Mondays. Lord willing, I'll see you next Monday. Go forth this week. And whatever leadership capacity that you're in, remember this lesson that we learned from the life of Moses. And I pray that you can lead with a shining face.